So Suzanne, I thought that we could maybe delve a little bit deeper into the cost side of things, and in particular, we hear a lot out there about the high costs of new drugs.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about some of the ways that provinces and territories help manage the costs, what that looks like?
Absolutely. So there's been many initiatives over the last couple of years, and let me use BC as an example. So what they're trying to do is, similar to an individual, but governments have finite budgets, and so you really need to look at how do I manage that effectively. And really what governments are trying to do is provide access to as many drugs as possible to really enhance patient health outcomes. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, providing drug coverage to enhance patient health outcomes. But with a finite budget, they have to get back to that cost effectiveness question that I talked to you about. And so what they've done is they've brought in initiatives that manage to limit or lower their overall budget costs so that they can bring on new drugs and still maintain a finite budget. So some of the things that they've done is, you may have heard, low-cost alternative, brand versus generic, maximum allowable cost, reference pricing, special authority criteria or limited use criteria or prior approval. These are all different terms that you'll hear, and really what they are is they're just all cost initiatives to manage the costs. And they do those using experts and scientific evidence to inform them. So they're not decisions that are taken lightly, but that helps to manage the budget costs and still provide access to effective medications for British Columbians and Canadians across the country. Provinces do something similar. So as an example, one of them, the term limited use or prior approval or special authority, that's where based on the clinical trial evidence, and they've decided that they're going to fund the drug, there will be specific criteria that patients have to meet in order to get coverage for that drug. And so a physician or nurse practitioner, who the prescriber is, has to apply on behalf of the patient and identify that they meet this predetermined criteria. And sometimes I used to hear people get frustrated because they didn't meet the criteria, but I've exhausted all other therapies, why can't I get access to that drug? Well, you have to understand, and it relates back to that whole approval process through Health Canada, is that a clinical trial is established in certain patient populations. That's where we know it works, that's where we know it's safe. And that's the only information we have in order to judge the efficacy and safety of a product. So that's the only evidence that the governments have to establish the criteria for coverage based upon that. If you go outside of that, really, you're almost entering into a clinical trial because the prescriber and you don't even know how you would react in that situation. So it gets to, will the drug work and is it safe? So that's how that criteria works, that's how that process works, but it's a way to ensure that people get access to new and innovative drugs in a thoughtful, cost-effective way, so it's enhancing the access. The reference pricing initiative, or maximum allowable cost, looks at drugs within similar therapeutic classes, so they're different chemical entities, but they're within a similar therapeutic class. Therapeutic class is something like, you may have heard of proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers, or drugs that treat like ACE inhibitors. And these are therapeutic classes of drugs, and so they set a maximum price because there's different variance prices within those different chemical entities. So it's just saying, we've looked at all the evidence says one's really no better than the other. There's no incremental benefit to this drug A versus drug B, and drug A costs more. We're only willing to pay up to drug B. So that's how that kind of reference pricing maximum allowable cost works. And then brand versus generic, that's where a branded drug is the drug that's been brought forward from a manufacturer. They're the ones that brought it originally to market, and government gives them what they call patent exclusivity or market exclusivity for a number of years, because they're the companies that invested to bring the drug to market. So they did the research and development and applied to Health Canada. After that market exclusivity or patent expires, then generic companies or other manufacturers are able to produce similar drugs within very narrow therapeutic ranges that are exactly the same drug, same chemical entity, just marketed by a different company. And they market it at less cost, and therefore that's how you get savings within the system.